Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. Today we're joined by Cartwright and we're going to be looking at education in the workplace, an area of the business where if you get it right, the rewards are absolutely amazing. I've known Kathy for a number of years, won't say how many, but hi Kathy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks very much indeed. Loving lockdown like everybody else in the world. Yeah, fantastic. Great to speak to you and I'm glad to be supporting the podcast.
Good. No, it's good to hear you. Yeah, we're almost at the end where I said to somebody else this morning, we're a lot closer to the end of this than we are the start. So I think we're in a good place. There's light at the end of the tunnel. The nights are getting lighter. It's getting a bit warmer, although it's freezing today as we record. So it's all positive, I think. And let's take that into the podcast.
Definitely. I think that's the way we've got to think, isn't it? Optimism and the future. That's what we've got to have in our minds, isn't it, at this moment? Definitely.
Absolutely. So for those that might not know you, Kathy, we worked together at Boots for a number of years, and it's a number of years ago now. But tell us a bit about yourself, what you've done historically, how you've got to kind of running your own business today.
So I've worked in training and people development for over 40 years. I started my training career in Boots, as you say. I started as an assistant trainer, then became a trainer, then a senior trainer, and then a training manager. And for over 25 years, I headed up the non-pharmaceutical training arm of Boots the Chemist. And there I was responsible for beauty, personal care training, photographic, customer service, and basically responsible for the development of thousands of colleagues working for Boots the Chemist. Along the way, with various restructures and reorganisation, my role grew arms and legs. I think it's fair to say I was also responsible for consultant workwear at one time. I developed a cash commission scheme for thousands of consultants. I was also responsible for ensuring we had the appropriate number of third-party consultants such as Estée Lauder, Clarins, Lancome to sell their products in Boots. So we needed to make sure we had the right people in the store. So I managed large teams, field forces as well. And within all of that, I had a multi-million-pound training budget. So 10 years ago, in one of the many restructures at Boots, I actually left. I wasn't ready at that point to go sailing into the sunset just yet. So I set up my own consultancy, really using the expertise that I'd gained at Boots, predominantly offering beauty, HR, training support to various companies and organisations. In the last 10 years, it's been absolutely fantastic. I've worked with large organisations, Unilever, M&S. I've appeared on QVC, I've trained in Selfridges and Harrods. So if somebody actually says, if you leave one organisation, there is a big wide world out there. And if you've got the training and expertise to actually go out there and deliver something, you can. It's been great my last 10 years. One of our major clients has actually been, and still is, M&S. I've worked with the senior leadership team there to develop and implement their current beauty offer. Developing people, I think, is something that I have a great passion for. Well, I know I have. I get a real buzz when I know I've made a difference to how those people perform their daily roles. So a lot of job satisfaction in the job that I do, Simon.
Good. Yeah, glad you enjoy it. And it takes me back to some of our conversations over the years around allocating numbers of consultants by type to stores and how that didn't work, and there was always somebody who was happy and somebody who wasn't happy. But I think
especially those lost their consultant numbers and consequently lost some of their salary budget. Yes.
Hey ho, things are the past.
It's all good experience though, isn't it, Simon? Yeah.
Exactly. Now, it's interesting because you used a couple of different words in kind of your career bio there. So lots around training departments, but yeah. Some companies call it training, some call it people development. There's L&D, learning and development. I'm not quite sure if those things are all the same or if there's a difference. I don't know what your view on the world is.
Well, actually, there's no difference. It's normally historical. The title sticks. At the end of the day, training, education, learning, development, all about actually helping fill the performance gap. Well-trained people, really motivated teams do perform better, and that obviously then aids the productivity for organisations.
Yeah, I think it's that dilemma, isn't it, that we have to spend some money to invest in our people. there's a danger they leave. There's a danger if you don't invest the money. I think it was Richard Branson said, the biggest danger is you don't invest in people and therefore they don't leave. And you kind of said in that bio piece, you're responsible for multi-million-pound training budgets. So does that mean that training is really expensive, or are there different ways that people can get results by investing in people without needing multi-million-pound budgets?
I suppose, yes, there is definitely different ways that people can invest in the training and development of their people. In our case, in my case, in Boots, it was because the scale of the company was so large. We had 40,000 people in retail at any one time, and some of the elements of training that my team and I delivered were to those 40,000 people. So hence we had the multi-million-pound budgets. You can obviously deliver training in different ways that are much less expensive, and you don't need that sort of a budget. But normally it is scalable, and the more people you have, the more money you have to invest in training.
It must be a bit of a dilemma, and I'm sure lots of people listening to this podcast who've worked in retail, hospitality and alike have been through various training programs or seminars and delivering of knowledge. But I think to get it right, it is probably a really difficult thing for organizations to decide where to start, because if you take your example before, 40,000 people, they're all different people, they all need different skills, they've all got potentially different parts of the job to do. So in your experience, where's the best place to start, and is there kind of a staged approach or a cyclical approach that you work towards?
Yeah, definitely there is, and there is an approach, but I think we just need to reflect on the fact, like you were saying, that well-trained people can deliver increased performance, business performance. How often have we actually heard that, Becky's a safe pair of hands, and, I've got every confidence in John delivering a great job. What that's really saying and doing is those people are trusted by the organisation to fulfil the role, and somewhere along the way, people like Becky and John will have actually been trained. So people know that training works, and there is, as you say, a systematic approach to training any organisation can take. I use a very, very simple approach, and it has 4 stages. The 4 stages involve an IBTN, and that's a little acronym for you there. So an investigation to business training needs, and sometimes that's actually called a TNA, which is another little acronym, which is training needs analysis. The second part of the systematic approach to training is the design. The third is the delivery. And then the fourth is the evaluation. So 4 very, very structured stages. And what we'll do in the next few minutes is go through each of those 4 stages.
And is there one stage that's more important than another?
Definitely. I always think that the most important stages are stages 1 and 4, the training needs analysis, or IBTN, and evaluation. They're not the most sexy part of training, but to ensure that the training is successful, and certainly if you are a training manager responsible for budgets, you really do need to look at the need for the training, and then to have the evaluation at the end of the training to back up the training success. So you've actually got something to take back to the business to say, look what my team have actually delivered for the business. A thorough IBTN really establishes that training is required. It should consider the overall business objectives, the KPIs that are required of its people, and together with the knowledge and skills of the individual jobs that are needed to do the job. So you've got to create in your IBTN a full analysis of what's needed for the business. Sometimes businesses think that training is the answer, but it may be an operational issue or an ergonomic issue that needs a little bit of tweaking to actually make that person perform better. In fact, I remember when you started your work studies right at the very beginning, and we had a long discussion, your team had undertaken a work study in a posh supermarket, and I know you were actually observing a colleague at the cash out, and the lady had been trained, she was super, but for some reason she was actually much slower than everybody else. But she just couldn't perform as fast as her colleagues, I think you told me. So why don't you finish the story? Because actually it was your work study that actually told me that, and it's always stuck in my mind. Do you remember it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different examples. I'll give a few, I think, to cover off different scenarios. But yeah, there was that one. We've had examples in previous where we both worked of things like loyalty cards. So people being really slow with loyalty cards, or customers fumbling, depends on when you ask for it in the stage of the transaction. Depends on how long the customer takes, but could the colleague be scanning while we're looking for our loyalty card and our purse, handbag on our phone these days? Yeah, speaking with customers, you've got some people, me and you, like a good chat that will speak forever and not be conscious that there's a massive queue building up. So over the years, I think there's been many stories around that kind of stuff. But yeah, you only see that firsthand when you're observing.
Yeah, definitely. And in that particular lady that I was talking about, I remember that example. Did you work out that she was actually left-handed and she was on the right-handed till point? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And you just think that is so simple, isn't it, really? I mean, she was as quick as anybody else once they actually put her onto a left-handed cash point. It was just amazing, really. But it's simple things like that people think, yeah, let's retrain that person, let's give them another round of training. But actually it's not a training need. In that case, it was an ergonomic need, really. And in the cases that you've just cited at Boots, what you're actually saying there is actually observe the customers other than the customer that you're serving, because there are other people waiting in the queue and they need serving eventually. Yeah, I can see what you're saying there, definitely. So an IBTN really needs to understand the organisation business aims and objectives, and how the aims are met by the range of jobs that exist in that organisation. So you've got your company, they know what they want to deliver, and they've actually got some people, some jobs in that business. To deliver those aims, once we know what we need to do, then what we do is basically you analyse the knowledge and skills and behaviours that the job requires versus the degree of competence of the people that are in the jobs. And what you then get is that knowledge gap. Does that make sense, Simon?
Yeah. So you could fall into a trap then, I take it, of almost presuming if you're not careful. So if you don't do the IBTN, then you make some presumptions. You're almost assuming what the gaps are rather than really knowing, and therefore everything you design isn't relevant.
Yeah. But right at the very beginning, you've really got to establish what are the business aims, what are the business objectives, who have we got in the jobs at the moment, what are their competencies, and then this is what we actually want them to do and have. So that creates your knowledge gap. Yeah.
Because I suspect people like the sexy stuff of delivery, don't they?
Gosh, they do. Absolutely. Yeah. Lots of people would just say, yeah, let's pull this together, do it. And people get a buzz out of it. But certainly if you're a training manager and you're accountable for a budget and accountable for delivery, then you've really got to get this point right, because it's at this early stage. Then what you need to do is to put down some KPIs and put a stake in the ground, just like marketing teams do at the beginning of a marketing I suppose a marketing promotion. What they will actually do is say, at the end of this, we will deliver 25% more profit for this particular range. What happens with training right at the very beginning, once you've actually established that need, it's at that point that you should actually say to the business, as a result of this training intervention, we will deliver greater productivity, increased sales, colleague retention will increase by X amount, customer satisfaction could actually increase by X amount. What else? Colleague satisfaction. There's lots of measures that organisations could use that actually a well-trained person delivering an increased productivity will actually impact on the business. And those KPIs established at the start of the training intervention, give focus to the training objectives, which moves on to the next point, which is design. Do you think we've created the right picture there in terms of the IBTN and the training needs analysis? It is a big part, but a lot of organisations, as you say, just jump to the sexy part of design. But there is that part that really does need to be thought about.
Well, if I understand it, then I'm assuming everybody else will. So if you take me as the lowest level of knowledge in understanding things, then I'm sure everybody else listening will.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, so we get on to the sexy stuff, the training design, and here you've actually got tons and tons to consider. Obviously, you've got the content, then you've got how will it be taught, where will it be taught, when will it be taught, what's the best method, who's going to deliver it, is the training technical, is it behavioural, is it practical, is an assessment needed, is the knowledge specialist, are there industry standards, are there ethical standards, are there legal standards, is the legislation that actually surrounds the subject matter, and are there policies and procedures in place that just have to be adhered to? There's just tons of things that you have to consider, and they are relative to that business that you're working in. Aware of all of those aspects, you can then start to think about the design. And what you will actually think about is what's the best design to deliver my particular message. If it's an update on a health and safety issue, then quite simply you could do quick and easy distance learning, test that knowledge, and then that's a tick in the box. If it's a total revamp on something like a makeup application lesson, then that's probably a rewrite for a face-to-face training session. So there are different ways in which you can actually skin this cat once you've actually decided what it is that you're actually needing to train. As I say, you can do face-to-face courses, conferences, workshops, informal meetings, or you can have distance learning such as e-learning, video conferences, online courses supported by tutors, colleague apps. Obviously, this method has actually really just taken off for the whole country, because this is how our teachers have actually taught our children in the lockdown. So online learning has actually become the norm. And when you're actually considering what you actually want to use as your training method, then the other thing you have to consider is the budget that you've actually got to play with. Face-to-face training is great. It's very reactive. You can actually see immediately if the learner has taken on board the messages. But face-to-face training is normally costly because you've got to pay for travel and accommodation. But the rewards normally through the evaluation will show the benefits of face-to-face training. As I've just said, distance learning has actually been the saviour in lockdown, with schools and colleges and organisations diverting to the methodology of the apps, and also obviously Teams and Zoom. It's just the way of the world now. A year ago, obviously Teams was there, people didn't use it, but now Zoom is just like a new word. It must be the most commonly spoken word, one of the most commonly spoken words other than COVID in the last year. It's just changed, hasn't it, the way that we actually communicate with people.
Yeah, and do you think that's going to stay? Do you think people will persevere with distance learning as their preferred method, or there'll be a real drive to get people back in a room? I'm kind of jury's out for me. I'm not quite sure.
Really? I think it's actually going to be a little bit of both. I actually think everybody's actually got the bug now, and I can actually see getting more elaborate with stuff like 3D glasses, specialist websites, and businesses are actually getting really geared up for people working at home. And I've spoken to a number of people that are saying we'll probably only go into the office now for 1 or 2 days a week. And it's established now that people will stay at home for 2 days. They'll probably work from home, but then they'll go in the office for the people contact and the team building. But a lot of the work will actually be at home. And people say very often that they're more productive at home. And so that, I think, will actually stay. There will be the need for face-to-face training, and obviously the interaction with people when you're actually at work will happen, but I don't think it'll happen to the same extent that it used to before we had the pandemic. But with all of that, businesses, I think, will need to shore up their IT infrastructures to ensure they can just handle all the sophisticated content that will actually come down the line. Stuff like videos, tutorials, all of these things are really data hungry. So a good solid infrastructure has to be there. And it will, I think there'll be a balance. I don't think we'll actually go back to how it was before. I think, as I say, because of people working at home more, then what will happen is they'll actually train at home as well. And we will have more elaborate online training for people working, definitely. So let me think now, looking at that, there's actually a lot to design. I'm not going to talk too much more about design and details, except one of the key things that you should always, as a trainer, really think hard about when you're designing anything is the training objectives. So what is it that the learner will be able to do once they've actually completed the training? So a very simple rule to have in your head is, at the end of this session, the trainee will be able to. And every trainer must start their training design with that as their mantra when they actually start putting pen to paper or start actually designing their training, because that actually gives clarity to what the trainee will actually learn. And the other thing that you have to think about when you're looking at design is that the content has to be balanced. You really have to be careful not to make it too heavy, because trainees need time to absorb the information. They also need time to reflect and think about what's been said to them or what they've actually just read. In many large organisations, they have design specialists in their teams to actually create the learning packages. Although in the main, most smaller companies have one or two trainers that actually do everything. And when designing training, it's always good to think about how the trainee will actually remember what you are telling them. And if you can incorporate storytelling, anecdotes, trainees are 20 more times likely to remember the story and the link to the message that you actually want to tell them, because people love stories, they get engaged, and in that way, they'll remember the knowledge that you want to actually impart. So it's a good tip, if you can, to basically put a storyline in. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
Okay. Once we've actually designed it, then we've actually got the delivery. And I could do a whole podcast on delivery. Obviously, we're just talking generally today about training. But training styles, personalities of trainers all differ. The same content can be delivered in different ways by different trainers. Again, very large organisations have delivery trainers because they know some people are better than others at presenting. But again, in most companies, the one trainer or two trainers do actually do everything. Some people really are born trainers. Others observe styles. They actually get trained. They look at different delivery methods. And I think it's fair to say they actually grow into the role with experience. Other factors, such as personality, character, temperament, disposition, all play a part in how the trainer actually delivers the message. So, it does alter by who does it and how they do it. And Simon, we've worked together for many, many years, and we've known trainers that are actually really, really engaging. whilst others just deliver the message. Can you see what I'm actually saying there? There's sort of the message is still the same, but you see two different people deliver it in different ways. Do you remember?
Yeah, absolutely. There's to quote a song line, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. I think that's an old 60s, 70s song line or song title. Yeah, the content can be the same, and it's interesting, isn't it? If you were to probably take a poll of people coming out of a room with the same content with two completely different styles of trainers, what they've retained and their enjoyment of the session could be completely different. So yeah, I think it's a big watch out, isn't it, that there's within a group of people will be more comfortable or retain the information or be more interested, even if the content's the same, just because somebody different's doing it.
Definitely. And that's all part of learning to be a competent trainer. You look at different styles and you look and think, yeah, I can perhaps use that little style or that technique the next time I do it. So any new trainers that are actually starting in their roles, they should observe as many people as they possibly can, because, you know, if you can actually adopt something that somebody else does and make it your own, you're just building your portfolio of delivery methods all the time. So it can work differently. You can actually grow in the role, and it really does come with experience and observation and just doing, really, definitely. So once we've actually gone through the delivery, we then have to go to the fourth part of our schematic, which actually is evaluation. And the method that I use, the most common one, is something called the Kirkpatrick model. And this again has got 4 different strands to it. Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So level 1 is really, really simple, and that just looks at reaction. How was it for you? Level 2 looks at the learning. So what did the learner actually learn? How did the tutor actually teach? And then the third level is, how has that learning been applied? And then the fourth level is results, what's been the impact? And again, this is something that certainly if you're responsible for a training budget, and in large organisations, they will need you to really give some evaluation, some strong evaluation to the business to say that training has worked. But let's just have a look at level 1. So level 1 is the reaction, as I would say, to the training, and it's questionnaires, and I would call them virtually happy sheets, and they're normally filled in at the end of a training session. So how was it for you today? They're usually anonymous, and it just provides a generalized feedback to the trainer about how that training session is actually being delivered. But it's not an effective way of really identifying if that training has been useful, or indeed if it's actually going to deliver any returns for the business. The next level is level 2. So what did you actually learn, or what did the trainee actually learn? And this is a more formalized approach, and it usually involves pre and post testing. It's designed to assess progress in the learner's ability, and it just really does check out whether the knowledge and skills that you actually need to do the job have been acquired. And as I say, it normally is by some sort of testing or observation that that person has actually been trained and can deliver the role that they're actually appointed to. The third level is, how was the training applied? And here it gets a little bit deeper, and it really gets into interviews, questionnaires, coaching. So you've been on that training course. How was it? What actually are you doing different? How do you feel different? Again, there's job observation. And again, at this level, we're actually comparing your ability, or the trainee's ability, versus what they had before and what they had post the training. So it's a little bit more depth to the individual and what they're actually doing now as a result of actually being on a particular training program. And then the fourth level is the measure of the financial results, which is the return on investment. And this is really going back right to the beginning. if you've undertaken a very, very strong and healthy IBTN or a training needs analysis right at the beginning of any training intervention, and if you put your, as I would call it, the stake in the ground at the beginning to say, yes, productivity will increase by X, then it's very easy at this point to actually go back and undertake that analysis, because you've actually got the basis there for the people who will undertake that analysis to actually go and compare before and after the training. So it's a performance indicator to actually say, yes, this is the benefits of having undertaken that training. This is what we're delivering to the business on the bottom line as a result of that training intervention and what actually happened.
So lots of organisations do that, which is good, but there's also a bunch, I assume, that almost don't delve deeply into all the levels. Why do you think that is? Is there some common theme across that, or is it company specific?
No, it's I suppose there's in some instances it's around basically, well, you've been on the course, that's it, get on with it. It's a little bit of disinterest, that's one reason why. It's just presumed that the training is going to be effective. It's like an act of faith, really. The second is cost. Serious evaluation actually costs, and to have analysts and probably in very large organisations, accountants, look at data before and after, all of that does cost the business. And the other thing as well is, if you're in a small organisation, because the trainers have to keep doing and doing, they're just constantly identifying the need, designing and delivering. The evaluation just gets put on the back burner and never actually happens, whereas it should, because, as I say, it's such a valuable tool to the business. Trainers in small organisations generally just move on to the next thing because they've got so much on their plate that they just have to deliver the training needs of the business, and getting down to the evaluation is actually quite tricky, but because it takes time and it takes money. But to do a comprehensive training intervention, then really you do have to, as I say, shore it up with the IBTN training needs analysis right at the very beginning, and then definitely the evaluation at the end to actually say to the business, hey, we've spent X amount of money and this is what we're actually delivering for you. And as a result, we've actually got this amount of productivity increase and this amount of profit increase, which is what we're all about at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And final question then. I think you've given us some amazing insight into the kind of structure of education in the workplace, and how you can really deliver the benefits from a personal people point of view, a customer point of view, and therefore underlying business objectives and profit. But final question, in a kind of time that cost is king and has been and will be, I suspect, for the next 12 to 18 months for lots of organisations, especially retail, it must be really tempting for the senior leaders in some of those organisations, when they're looking at cost cutting, to use the training budget as a way of saving some money. So taking cost out of the training budget. Feels to me like, after this conversation, what we've said, that's really a short-term view, because what you're doing is stifling the long-term growth of your colleagues, developing your customer experience, potentially increasing turnover. So any wise words for people that are thinking that would be a good way to save money?
I think certainly when we come out of lockdown, people will want to be back on the high street, whether it's actually in leisure, whether it's in hospitality, whether it's in retail. And when people go, when our customers actually are allowed out, what they will do is really look for quality interaction with individuals, whatever that is in, as I say, retail, hospitality, leisure. And what we do as people, we actually buy that person. We want to talk to that person. If I get somebody who can talk to me, interact with me, tell me what I want, actually sell themselves as well as what they're actually selling, I am more likely to actually buy or use whatever that person is actually recommending. So as you say, I think it's a little bit short term, and really what I would say is businesses should look to invest at this time to actually be there when their customers can actually come out and literally start spending money and getting back to normal.
I agree. Listen, it's been great to catch up as always. I always enjoy our conversations. I learn something. You've always keep me entertained. So it's been lovely to catch up. Really appreciate you coming on. If people want to get in contact with you, then I mean we've got all your details. If they contact me, we can do an introduction and you can continue the conversation. But thanks again, Kathy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much indeed then, Simon. Really, really enjoyed it. And